Okay, well here we are. Time to try something new. Not that I don't always try something new, but I think this is the first game that I've looked at and said, wow, this is pure Ameritrash before I bought it, or whatever, and grabbed. It looked interesting. The box, Age of Mythology. It's got that big box. Definitely looks like it, all these plastic pieces and everything. Oddly enough, though, and I had this discussion with Hello Gregor, after reading the rules, it doesn't feel like Ameritrash. Yeah, it's got the plastic pieces, and it's got dice. You roll lots and lots of dice. But it's got a lot of other factors in it. For one, I looked at it and said, it's got these little wooden cubes, and it's got a play style that look, and these resource tokens and buildings you build and everything. It's got aspects of it that look like, kind of like Puerto Rico or some other Euro game. All right. Top of that, it's got these battle cards, which aren't particularly, but it's got action cards, which aren't really a CDG mechanism, but they definitely give a card-driven feel to the game, which is to say you hold a hand of these and get to play them as your actions. Now, and you've got kind of like in things like Nappy's War, well, not exactly, but you've got a set of ones you can always choose, and then you've got a random deck that you can also draw from, depending on how much you want to control what you're doing. Okay. That said, it does have lots and lots of little plastic pieces. And I want to talk about those little plastic pieces for a moment because they're not easy to distinguish from one another. And that's a huge disadvantage for me in the component realm. So this is a Valkyrie, and these are Jarls. Very, very different pieces. I mean, if I put them real close and I look, man, there's tits on that one. But there's a number of these where this pile, I feel like I'd have to sort it and build it into little lines, and even then, it may be difficult to discern things. And it's fairly important that you get the right pieces at the right time. There's a lot of different battle. Each battle card has a piece, at least one, reporting to it. So here we have hoplites, Totes, Hydra. Well, that's pretty obvious, right? Cyclops. I assume that's fairly obvious. It's probably pretty big. Yeah, he's a big guy. But the Minotaur is probably pretty big. Manticore is going to be pretty big. Centaur is going to be obvious. Medusa. But then we start getting to the heroes, and these are the most important of the pieces, I think. Of course, there are very few of them, but they look very similar to the normal pieces. That's kind of a shame. I know they're trying to maintain some kind of level of scale here. At the very least, you get a pile of minis, that you could mount on cardboard or something and use for a real minis campaign. But unpainted, they're not all that attractive. I'm not sure how much I want to put the effort into painting, although definitely, if I still had my fantasy minis with me, I would be considering these as an addition to my set. Okay, let's go through the game itself. So, at the start of the game, each player gets one of these boards, and they get a set of cards. And at first, I thought I had a problem with the cards because two of them were stuck together, and it looked like one of my advanced ages had a red victory on the back. You have these victory point cards that are kind of shared. Counters for buildings, lots and lots of houses. I've pulled some of the counters out that I'm not going to be using. Not that. And some wooden tokens that I'm not going to be using. Those wooden tokens, most of them are resource points. The red ones are not, however. They're victory points, and they're the goal of the game. If the game ends, whoever has the most of those wins. Okay. So what happens? Well, on each turn, the first thing that happens is each player, and we'll start with the first player, and I'll just be shooting this way, which surprisingly could be clockwise, but I just like the left to right aspect always. So, since I don't have any two-dimensional situation, it's all linear, it all works fine. And starting with the first player, you play a chip, a victory point token, on one of these four things. Let me explain what they do. Won the last battle. Every time a battle's fought, whoever wins gets whatever tokens are on there. The other three are allocated only at the end of the game. Whoever has got the largest army at the end of the game, whoever's got the most of these buildings, and whoever builds the wonder, which I think also counts as a building, but I'm not positive. That's something I'd look up at the moment. Okay. So after each player places one of those, then everybody gets to draw their cards. And based on the age that they're in, they get a certain number of cards. At the beginning of the game, you only get 4. But as you advance, and that's done through these action cards, and actually you have this option in your permanent hand to advance the age. You actually have 2 options to do that. That's going to be pretty tricky, I would guess, but we'll see. You're allowed, yeah. So you use those to move the age forward into the next one, and you become more powerful as the age advances. There are cards you can't even use, as far as I know. I haven't looked through the deck too carefully, but there are certainly heroes, etc., that can only happen during certain ages. The mythic characters, I think, are allowed anywhere, even the archaic, which I find kind of weird. But let me look at the muster. Yeah, that's one of the cards. Recruit. Yeah, mortal and myth can be created at any time. Okay. So, let's see. You draw a number of cards. If you take them from here, they're your choice. Any that you take from here, you're getting a random assortment. And you're only going to get to play 3 of them during your turn. So, even in the archaic age, you've got at least one that you can draw from the deck, I would assume. Of course, if you've got any cards left over, they count against you. Right. Then each player in turn plays a card and takes its effect. And each of the effects has different values, which we can go over very briefly. So the first one's an explorer. Oh, at the beginning of the game, there's a pile of these territories on the board, and each player in turn, and we kind of do this snake-wise, going that way, that way, that way, that way, etc. So this guy gets first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, right? Pick from here. And these go in your lands, and they have to match the terrain. And one thing you'll notice is that every player board, and this is kind of interesting, there's actually 6 player boards, 2 of each, and the counter mixes, you can use the 2 different shades if you're playing with more than 3 players. The game only holds 4 players though, unless you go and get an expansion, because otherwise you don't have enough cubes, you don't have enough of the different counter mixes, and I don't remember, I think that's it, yeah. And if you want to play with more than 6, you can do that, but you need more boards. The one restriction there is you can never be sitting next to your own race, if you like, culture. I don't know. Culture, I guess, is more applicable. Kind of weird. Okay, where were we? Yeah. So after these are going to be assigned, and you get to pick them based on the terrain that you have empty. And if you fill up all of your terrain, you can't pick any more of that type. Each of these has on it what it produces. What do the colors mean? Well, we already know what red means. Brown is wood, blue is water, no. The favor of the gods. Green is grain, and gold is yellow. No, gold is gold. Yellow is gold. Whatever. All right. So, you play your cards one at a time, and well, you play a card, then the next player plays, then the next player plays. and you take the action of that card. What are the different actions? Well, Explore allows everybody to get more lands. When you play this, you draw a number of resource tiles, and mine are coming from Jeff Bag, 24 stitches per inch. Anybody from Buffalo knows what I'm talking about. It's a pretty bag though. I carry my Go board in it. You pull out, I don't remember how many. The number on the card. So yeah, each card has a number, which is, well, this one doesn't. This one says one more tile than the number of players. Okay, but many of the cards have a number which indicate how powerful they are. This one has its number kind of implicit. Okay, the player who draws it gets that many out of the pool onto the table. Now the table is emptied after each draw, as far as I know, after people select. The player who chose the card gets to play one of them, and then places that on his board as he likes. Then each other player in turn gets to pick one. You can pass if you don't want. And then after all selections have been made, they go back in the pool. Yeah. I think you're only allowed to pick one on this. Yes, everybody picks one. Okay, the next card is the Gather card. So, the player who plays this gets to make two choices, at least with the permanent action cards. I'm not sure if the random ones give other additions. Yeah, I believe they do. Okay. So, the first type says, and this is your permanent type, terrain type or resource type. So you can say, all things that produce gold will produce. And then everybody gets gold, but it starts with the player who drew it. If the pool runs out, you don't get it. If you pick a land type, only that land type produces. So for example, the Egyptians might say, I just want deserts to produce, because nobody else has many deserts. Okay, and then that produces. The player who plays the card has an additional advantage, and I haven't played any of these on the board, somewhere or another. I bet you these are them. There's villagers. They're carrying a little head, and they have like a little knife or something, I don't know. They're not combat characters, but they can be working a location. And when they work a location, I believe you get one extra resource of that type whenever you gather in a way that works with that type. Now, the advantage of playing the card is you can move all your villagers around. You can pull them out of, I don't know, I'd put them over here to keep them from getting confused with the military units, but you can also move them around here. I don't think they do anything in the town itself. Okay. Next one's build. The player is allowed to spend points to build. And after they pay, they buy a building card, which is one of these suckers. And you're only allowed one of each except houses, which you're allowed 10 of. And they have to all fit on your city section. What's the advantage for being the drawer? I don't know what it is. After paying the cost, the builder takes... The player then gains the advantage of that building once his build action is completed, but not turned. Yeah. Okay. Are you allowed to build more than one? Looks like it. I don't know. Oh, yes, you're allowed to build the number equal to the number there. And it doesn't look like there's a huge advantage to playing a build card for yourself. Recruit You're allowed to buy a number of troops equal to the number, and there's no real limit there, except that you can't buy heroes until you're at the level that you build them. You don't get villagers this way. You only get villagers when you build a house. You recruit a new villager. Trade. Trade allows you to trade cubes to the bank. And there's a cost on each trade card. So for example, this would cost me 2 resource cubes. And then I could trade cubes of any color for cubes of the color or colors I want from the bank. So I guess I go from one color to as many different ones as I like. Oh, there's another, the Gather All card, which allows all resources to be gathered without regard to what kind of terrain, etc. Those are random cards only. The next age card, well, we have an example of one of these. They cost you to get to the next age. So for example, to get to the classical age, you actually start with enough, 4 of each resource to go there. You don't have to pay victory points for anything. And that would then allow you to start building the classical heroes. However, you probably don't want to spend all your resource points at the beginning of the game moving up in age, because other people are going to do things like build buildings, etc. Alright, finally there's the attack card, and the number there indicates how many troops each player is allowed to put into the battle. And the troops have to come from here, and then when the battle is actually resolved, you play card against card, and the card indicates, I believe, a number of dice. This is the cost to build. It indicates a number of dice that gets for base. You'll notice all the mortal ones seem to get 3. I haven't looked at all the decks. You know, the elephants look like they should probably get more, but I doubt that. I think that's, let's see, first battle. Yeah, they're all 3s. But they get modifiers as well, a number of dice. So for example, this gets +3 dice versus either flyers or warriors. And if you look here, this is, for example, a mortal warrior. So if I could fight Egyptians, and you can't, because you can only fight somebody who's next to you. That only matters in a more than 3-player game. Okay. How the fighting's handled? You roll a bunch of dice against each other. Whoever gets the most 6s kills the other guys. You match off one character to one character, and roll a dice. Those characters are selected from the battle cards. So neither player knows what the other's going to do. That's going to be kind of a pain for me playing solo. I'll use some dice and some guesswork based on, you know, what I see the other guy has. Okay. And what? Whoever rolls the most dice wins? I think so. Yeah. If both people tie, you get to keep rolling forever. Luckily, chances are pretty high that at least some progress will be made in the battles, but that's going to wear out my arm, isn't it? Okay. There's an example of the battle. And, you know, there's this full-color rulebook. I think this is de rigueur for this kind of game, so I'm not going to complain too much, but you know how much I love those if you follow me. So, either player can end the battle before any round. When a battle is done, when a battle starts, the attacker has to pick what he's attacking. And let me see what he can pick. If he picks the city and he wins, he gets to destroy an enemy building in the city. If he picks the production area, he's able to capture a resource-producing tile and move it onto his own territory. Of course, if he doesn't have room for it, he can just salt it and destroy it or whatever. And finally, if he attacks the holding area itself, he's allowed to capture up to 5 of the opponent's resources, not victory points. Okay. So, if the defender retreats, he gives up whatever he's going to lose. If the attacker retreats, he doesn't win. Some of the buildings for example, the tower and the wall make it harder to attack in a specific location. And let me see, those should be defined somewhere. I may have skipped over it. I may list each building somewhere. I don't know. Here we go. Yeah, so for example, and I think these work the same way, the tower, exactly like the wall. The wall gives 2 extra dice to the defender if the battle is in the appropriate place, which in the case of the wall is the city. The tower gives the extra dice in case of the defender, in case of production. And is there an equivalent for the other? I don't see one. I don't think you can protect against a raid against resources. Okay. Some of these others give you additional other bonuses. So for example, this gives wood additional per gather. If you look at that, you have to actually be the person who plays the gather attempt, but it looks like you get it regardless of what you pick. So even if you didn't produce any wood, the wood workshop will give you additional wood, give you some wood. Okay. Some of the others, reducing cost of building. This one negates the wall and tower and lets you destroy 2 buildings if you go after the city. That's pretty powerful in fighting cities. Alright. So then after everybody's played 3 times around, so everybody's got at least 1 card left, you start the turn order shifts and you start over. You put more victory point cards or more victory point cubes on the cards. The only one that can be collected during the game is winning battles, and that's whoever didn't retreat or whoever didn't get wiped out. And you play through another sequence and another sequence and another sequence. Once you hit, I believe it's the Mythic Age, you are allowed to build a wonder. There's only one wonder. The bonus of the wonder is, A, you collect those victory points there, and the game ends. You don't want to do this, obviously, if you're not going to win the game by doing it. Unless you're tired of the game, perhaps. That's about it. I'll send this up, and then we'll take a look at how it actually plays. I'm not sure I'm going to get any chance to play it tonight. It's pretty late. But we'll see.